عصر بخیر میگم
For all of you,
و امیدوارم از بحث‌های خوبی که دیروز امروز بوده لذت برده باشید.
and I hope that you have benefited very much from the very rich discussions that we have had yesterday and today.
این بحث‌ها همه ما رو به آینده امیدوار می‌کرد.
All these discussions, of course, make us optimistic and hopeful about the future.
شنیدیم که میشه بسیاری از بیماری‌ها رو از بین برد.
We heard that we have many kinds of diseases, for example, that we have the possibility to cure now.
حتی ممکنه ترافیک رو هم از بین ببریم و انقدر لازم نباشه توی ترافیک بمونیم.
We even heard that it will be possible to eliminate traffic jams altogether, and then we will not be compelled to stay in them forever.
شنیدیم که میشه ربات‌های کوچیکی در داخل بدن انسان کار گذاشت که کاربرد بسیار مفیدی در معالجه داشته باشه.
We even heard that in the future perhaps there will be nano robots that can be inserted in the human body that can work well within the human body to improve certain conditions.
اما چند سوال اساسی هست که پرسیده نشده و براش هنوز جوابی نداریم.
Nevertheless, there are a few main fundamental questions that were neither asked nor do we have any answers to yet.
با این همه پیشرفت‌های علمی و تکنولوژیکی که همه قابل پیش بینی هست اتفاق خواهد افتاد، آیا در 100 سال آینده مردم خوشبخت‌تر خواهند بود؟
And the question is this, with all the progress that we are going to have, scientific and technological progress in the next 100 years, will people be happier than they are now?
آیا ما چالش هایی که امروز باهاش مواجه هستیم در سطح ملی و بین المللی اون چالش ها رو حل خواهیم کرد؟
Will we be able to resolve all the challenges at the national and international level that we are facing now?
وقتی که شما اینجا میشنوید از تولید انبوه اطلاعات تا حدی که میگویند محققین برای پردازش این اطلاعات کم داریم، آیا در 100 سال آینده این گپ بزرگتر میشه یا از بین میره؟
We heard that we have so much data now that we are neither in a position to store, nor do we have enough scholars and technical people to process them. Now, this gap, is it going to close in the future, or is it going to remain the same?
اینها سوالاتی است که اهمیتش از تکنولوژی اگر بیشتر نباشه کمتر نیست.
These are questions which are very important, and if their importance is not more than technological aspects, it certainly is not less.
برای اینکه هدف تکنولوژی و علم این است که انسان راحت‌تر و بهتر و خوشتر زندگی کنه و اگر ما بخواهیم وجود انسان رو فراموش بکنیم اون علم دیگه به درد نمیخوره.
Because the purpose of all science and technology is to enable people to live better, more comfortably, happier. And if this objective is not achieved, and if we forget human beings, so what is the use?
من اجازه میخوام که خاطره رو براتون بگم.
Allow me to share a memory with you.
من ماه گذشته 12 روز با پناهندگان به اروپا همراه بودم، در کمپ‌های اینا بودم، کمپ‌های اینها سفر کردم.
Last month, I went and I spent 12 days with the migrants to Europe, the asylum seekers, the refugees. I went and I visited their camps and I stayed there and I talked to them.
روزانه بین 6 تا 8 هزار نفر وارد اروپا میشن.
On average, between 6,000 to 8,000 of these migrants come to Europe every day.
و اینها از طریق پولی که به قاچاقچی‌ها در ازمیر میدند سوار قایق‌های بادی میشن و از ازمیر وارد نزدیکترین جزیره در یونان میشن.
What they do is that first of all they pay their way to a smuggler who transfers them to the city of Izmir in Turkey, and then they are going to be heaped on boats that brings them to the nearest island in Greece.
بسیاری از اونها در دریا غرق شدند.
Many of them, of course, have drowned in sea.
و درآمد روزانه قاچاقچی‌ها از این طریق روزانه 9 میلیون دلاره.
And the daily income of the smugglers that engage in this activity is $9 million a day.
من با چند نفر از این مهاجرین صحبت کردم و اونا گفتن که حدود بین 1000 تا 1200 دلار میدن که سوار یک قایق بشن.
I talked to some of these refugees and they said that each one of them have to pay between $1,000 and $1,200 to the smugglers for the passage.
هر قایق ظرفیت تقریباً 30 تا 35 نفر رو داره، ولی که حدود 100 نفر باید سوار بشن.
Each boat, of course, normally has the capacity for 30 to 35 people, but they put 100 of them in each boat.
و من پرسیدم که خب آیا نمیشه شما خودتون با این پول یه قایق درست کنید، یه قایق بهتری کرایه کنید و باهاش بیاید و با این خطرات مرگ مواجه نشید؟
And what I asked was, well, with the money that you pay the smugglers, is it not possible that a group of you get together and perhaps purchase or rent a better boat in better condition so that you can have a safe passage and you do not drown in the sea?
با اونا گفتن نه، برای اینکه قاچاقچی‌ها اجازه نمیدن که ما با وسیله دیگه‌ای بیایم. و حتی یکی از اونا گفتش که من وقتی که دیدم ظرفیت زیاده ترسیدم و می‌خواستم برگردم که قاچاقچی با اسلحه رو به من واسطاد و گفت حق نداری برگردی و باید سوار شی.
And they said no, the smugglers do not allow us to do that independently. And one of them even told me that when I got on the boat, I changed my mind and I wanted to get back because I saw what the conditions were. Whereupon the smuggler drew his weapon on me and he said, no, if you do, I'm going to shoot you.
این مسئله سوالات زیادی رو برای ما مطرح میکنه.
Now, this whole scenario lends itself to a lot of questions.
که اگر به اون سوالا امروز جواب ندیم، مسلما 100 سال آینده اروپا مواجه با مشکلات بسیار عدیده‌ای خواهد شد.
And if we do not take it upon ourselves to answer these questions now, what is for sure is that in the next 100 years, Europe will face very, very serious problems.
چرا یه عده‌ای این چنین فرار میکنن و حتی با قبول خطر مرگ خودشون رو میرسونن به اروپا؟
The question is, why is it that so many people are prepared to escape their home, their country, and accept the danger, even death, to reach Europe?
و سرنوشت اینها در اروپا چه خواهد شد؟
And what is going to be their fate once they reach Europe?
و تا کی میشود این انبوه مهاجرین رو پذیرفت؟
And up to what point and until what time is Europe able to accept this wave of refugees?
تا کی قراره هر روز این همه مهاجر بیاد؟
Until when can we take it that daily so many refugees come this way?
اینا سوالاتی است که پاسخ ما اونها اگر جوابی امروز براش پیدا نکنید، نه تنها 100 سال بعد بلکه حتی 20 سال بعد مشکلات بسیار عدیده‌ای بیاره.
These are questions that if we do not take upon ourselves now to answer, we are going to have serious problems with not only for the next 100 years, but even within the next 20 years.
شاید 100 سال قبل کسانی که در اروپا و در آمریکا نشسته بودن فکر می‌کردن که به ما چه مربوطه که یه گوشه از جهان جنگه.
100 years ago, those who lived in Europe or in the United States could ignore what was happening somewhere else in the world and would say, well, it's not our business if you have war some other place.
فکر می‌کردن که اگر تو آفریقا قحطی است به ما چه ارتباطی داره؟
They would think, well, if there's a famine in Africa, what does it have to do with us?
اما الان دیگه نمیتونه این حرف بزنیم.
But now we cannot say that anymore.
برای اینکه وقتی که در یک گوشه از جهان جنگ یا قحطیه یا دیکتاتوریه، اونها مردم که ناامید بشن اون وقت شهر و زندگیشون رو ول میکنن و پا میشن میان سراغ شما.
Why? Because in one corner of the world you have famine, or you have a dictatorship, or you have poverty. Those who are struggling with those conditions know that there are better conditions elsewhere. So they will abandon what they have and they will go towards the better ones.
تا کی میشه این وضعیت رو ادامه داد؟
How long can this situation continue?
بیش از 80% ثروت جهان در دست 1% مردم اونه.
More than 80% of the wealth of the world is owned by only 1% of the population of the world.
و این جمعیت انبوهی که از امکان زندگی با کرامت نداره بالاخره مجبور حرکت کنه.
And the high proportion of the people who do not have the possibility of living with dignity will be compelled to move and go elsewhere at long last.
اطلاعات زیادی تولید شده.
A lot of information has been generated, as we saw.
اما این اطلاعات به درد کی میخوره؟
But what use is this information and for whom?
فقط کسانی که پول دارن که مدرسه خوب برن و بعد بتوانن خودشون رو به دانشگاه برسونن.
It seems only those who can afford to go to a good school and can afford later on to go to the university.
شما بودجه کشورها رو نگاه کنید ببینید چقدر از بودجه آموزش پرورش کاسته شده.
If you look at the budget of each country for education, you will see that it decreases every year.
پولی که بایستی صرف بچه‌ها بشه اسلحه می‌خرن همدیگر می‌کشن.
The money which has to be spent on the education of children is spent on buying weapons in order that they can kill each other.
بنابراین اگر ما از گذشته عبرت نگیریم آینده مسلماً وضعیتمون بدتر خواهد بود.
Therefore, if we do not learn the lessons of the past, in the future we definitely will have a situation which is more serious than now.
و ما چیکار باید کرد؟
Now, what do we have to do?
مسئله مهم عدالت اجتماعیه.
What is important is social justice.
عدالت اجتماعی هم در سطح ملی و هم در سطح بین‌المللی.
Social justice both at the national and international levels.
مطمئن باشید که افرادی که در کشورهای کم توسعه یافته زندگی میکنن بالاخره کشورهای توسعه یافته رو مجبور میکنند، ناگزیر میشوند که به اونها هم توجه بکنند.
Rest assured that those who live in less developed countries and the conditions that they go through will compel the more developed countries to take notice of them and to accept them.
بنابراین قبل از اینکه فاجعه صورت بگیره بایستی عدالت اجتماعی رو برقرار بکنیم.
Therefore, before a catastrophe comes to pass, we should try to establish social justice.
این روزها همه صحبت از آیسیس میکنن.
Nowadays, there is a lot of talk about ISIS.
و برای از بین بردن آیسیس یک ائتلافی از 40 کشور شروع شده که شب و روز اینا رو بمباران میکنن.
And to eradicate and to defeat ISIS, a coalition has been created which consists of 40 countries which day and night they are bombarding ISIS.
و به خاطر همین مسئله است که 70% از افرادی که دارن تو سیل مهاجرین به اروپا میآیند از کشورهایی هستند که آیسیس در اونجا فعاله.
And it's for this reason that 70% of the wave of refugees consists of those people who come from countries where ISIS is very active.
آیسیس فقط یک گروه تروریستی نیست بلکه یک ایدئولوژی غلطه.
But we have to note that ISIS is not only a terrorist group, it is also a wrong kind of ideology.
و ایدئولوژی رو با بمباران نمیشه از بین برد.
And you cannot abolish or eradicate an ideology through bombardment.
این تجربه‌ای بوده که در مورد طالبان ما داشتیم.
And this is the experience that we gained when dealing with the Taliban.
بعد از 11 سپتامبر طالبان رو به طور دائم سعی کردن که بکشن و از بین ببرن، اما هر یک نفر که کشته شد به جاش 5 نفر از بچه‌ها و برادرها و برادرزاداش تفنگ دست گرفتن و آوردن جلو.
After the disaster of 9/11, there was an effort to eradicate, to eliminate the Taliban. They were bombarded, they were killed, etc. But for each person who died from the Taliban, there were 5 or 10 of the others, the brother, the nephew, the niece, etc., who took guns and went and replaced them.
و به همین دلیل می‌بینیم که تعداد طالبان نه تنها کم نشد بلکه بیشتر هم شد که آیسیس هم در حقیقت نوعی انشا و طالبانه.
And this is why we see that not only the Taliban did not increase, but they also decreased. They did not decrease, but they also increased. And as a matter of fact, we can say that ISIS at the beginning was also a splinter group from the Taliban.
و حالا اجازه بدین که یک کمی تو در عالم خیال به گذشته برگردیم.
Now, let us take a trip down the memory lane and go back to the past.
اگر به جای حمله به افغانستان و کشتار طالبان آمریکا به یاد و به نام 4000 نفری که در 11 سپتامبر کشته شده بود 4000 مدرسه در افغانستان میساخت چه میشد؟
Let's assume that instead of invading Afghanistan and killing the Taliban, in the name of the 4,000 victims of 9/11 events, the United States would build 4,000 schools in Afghanistan. If it had done that, what would happen?
مسلما بچه‌ای که در مدرسه‌ای که به نام جورج مثلا ساخته شده بود میخواست درس میخوند یادش میافتاد که برادر یا پدر من باعث مرگ جورج شدن ولی که من دارم تو مدرسه اون درس میخونم.
What is for sure is that the child in Afghanistan who would go to a school called George, for example, after one of the victims, would remember that although his father or his brother were involved in the 9/11 events, but he is, as a matter of fact, studying in a school that is in the name of George, so he's not going to follow in their footsteps.
اون دیگه تفنگ دستش نمیگرفت که یه آمریکایی رو بکشه.
He would never take a gun and go and kill another American.
حالا ما داریم همون تجربه شکست خورده طالبان رو در مورد آیسیس هم تکرار میکنیم.
But what we are doing now is that we are repeating the same failed experience that we had with the Taliban regarding ISIS.
و به همین دلیله که من همیشه میگم آیسیس رو به جای بمب بر سر آیسیس کتاب بریزید.
And that's why I always say instead of throwing bombs on ISIS, throw books on them.
یعنی در حقیقت یک ایدئولوژی غلط رو سعی کنید با یک ایدئولوژی درست جایگزین کنید.
In other words, try to supplant a wrong ideology with the right one.
از چه طریقی؟
How?
بلندگو بدهید به مسلمانان مدرن که تفسیر درستی از اسلام ارائه میدن.
Those modern Muslims who have the right interpretation of Islam, allow them the space to talk.
کتابای اونها رو ترجمه کنید، اونها رو به جهان بشناسانید.
Translate their books, make publicity for them so that the world will know them.
اجازه ندید که بچه‌های شما در اروپا فریب یک ایدئولوژی منحرف و غلط رو بخورن.
Do not allow your children in Europe to be deceived by a wrong and distorted ideology.
با یک ایدئولوژی درست آیسیس رو از بین ببرید.
And try to eliminate ISIS through using the right ideology.
البته ایدئولوژی بدون عدالت اجتماعی به درد نمیخوره.
Of course, there is no use having an ideology without having social justice.
تروریست‌ها از فقر مردم سوء استفاده میکنن.
The terrorists use and benefit from the poverty of the populace.
من در صحبتی که با مهاجرین به اروپا داشتم اطلاعات جالبی به دست آوردم.
When I was talking to these migrants who have come to Europe, I gathered some very interesting information.
آیسیس به هر جوانی که بهش بپیونده یک خونه میده.
ISIS gives a house to every youth who joins them.
حقوق میده.
Gives them a salary.
اسلحه میده.
Gives them weapon.
و بهش یک هویت میبخشه.
And therefore creates an identity for this person.
و اینا جوانایی بودن که توی کشورهای زندگی میکردن که تحت رژیم استبدادی بودن.
And these are the youth who came from countries and were living under conditions which were dictatorial.
دسترسی به تحصیلات نداشتن.
They did not have access to education.
شغلی نداشتن، فقیر بودن.
They did not have any employment, no job. They were poor.
هویتی نداشتن.
And therefore no identity.
حالا آیسیس آمده و به اینا همه اینا رو داده.
And now ISIS comes along and gives them all that they did not have.
و از همه مهمتر این است که به اینها به دروغ عنوان میکنه که غرب با اسلام دشمنه و میخواد اسلام رو از بین ببره.
And the most important thing is that they lie to them and they say that the West is against Islam and wants to eliminate Islam, wants to destroy it.
بنابراین ما که اینها رو میدونیم چرا فکر میکنیم فقط با بمباردمان میشه اینا رو از بین برد؟
Now, if we know all this, why do we think that through bombarding ISIS we can eliminate it?
بنابراین اگر قرار به پیش بینی برای 100 سال آینده باشه من امیدوارم که
Therefore, if we are to make predictions for the next 100 years, my hope is this.
با از بین بردن فاصله غنی و فقیر در سطح ملی و بین المللی و ایجاد عدالت اجتماعی بیشتر
My hope is this, that we try to close the gap between the poor and the rich, both at the national and international level, and that we also create more social justice.
و با مبارزه با ایدئولوژی های غلط
And that we try to combat wrong ideologies.
حقوق بشر و کرامت انسانی در 100 سال آینده بیشتر مورد توجه قرار بگیره.
To respect human rights and to establish human dignity in the next 100 years.
فراموش نکنیم که ما در عصر جهانیشون هم به سر میبریم.
We should not forget that we are all living in the age of globalization.
شما الان دیگه نمیتونید چشم ببندید بر حوادثی که مثلا در مالی اتفاق افتاده.
And we are not in a position anymore to close our eyes to what's happening, for example, in Mali.
شما نمیتونید فراموش کنید حادثه‌ای که در نیجریه اتفاق افتاده.
We cannot forget, for example, what happened in Nigeria.
فردا اون حادثه ممکنه در شهر شما تکرار بشه.
Why? Because the same incident can happen the next day in your own city.
ما از الان میتونیم جلوش رو بگیریم.
We know what has happened, therefore we should prevent it now.
و برای آینده‌ای بهتر همه با هم کار کنیم.
And all of us should work together for a better future.
آینده‌ای که انسان و ارزش‌های انسانی پایش باشه، نه 4 تا عدد.
Yeah. A future where the fundamentals and the basis is formed by human beings and human values, not numbers here and there.
بنابراین با تمام احترامی که برای محققین قائلا میخوام ازشون خواهش بکنم در تمام تحقیقاتتون انسان رو مدار تحقیقات قرار بدهید نه اعداد و رقم رو.
Therefore, with all the respect that I have for scholars and for scientists, I would like to ask you that when you do your research and your scientific work, always put human beings in the center of your work and not numbers.